You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right, folks, good morning and welcome to a very special episode of the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. We have a great guest for you. I want to say hi to everybody over in the chat. This was kind of not super well planned, but I wanted to get this podcast in. It's really important. We're going to be talking about some things when it comes to geopolitics, but I think more importantly, what we're going to be talking about is some objective truths. And I think this is a discussion that needs to be had today. Suddenly, truth is subjective. Truth is relative to whatever you want it to be. And I think that we need to kind of nail down what objective truths actually are. And it's something that everybody needs to know about. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you like, subscribe. Down in the description below is a link. If you'd like to become a member and support this channel is 100% supported by viewers. So go do that. We really appreciate it. And while you're down there, I want you to go follow our guest. We have all of his social media links down there as well. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome Dave Halevy to the show. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. And we appreciate your time this morning. So if you will, Dave, take just a minute and introduce yourself to everybody out there.
Well, thanks, Gary. Great to see your beautiful face, Jen. Good to hear you back there. Yeah, so I'm an American Israeli. I immigrated to Israel. I live here with my family. I have 2 kids in the evil IDF force that, obviously, I was almost late to this meeting because I was at a Jews Rule the World meeting. I don't know if you know about that, but we have these meetings where we talk about how we can inflict the maximum amount of,
command and control upon the globe.
Yeah, exactly. So, we're being a little more vocal about it these days since people have found us out, so I have have my YouTube channel, do a podcast. I'm also big into a big part of my daily life here is giving therapy classes to IDF soldiers that have trauma, post-trauma, those kinds of things. We have tens of thousands of IDF soldiers that are injured from the war, both physically and, of course, mentally, PTSD, all that kind of stuff. Gary, all about that kind of stuff from war. War is a very terrible thing, a very bad thing. And the reality is that Israelis, we, above all people, want to live in peace and harmony. And I'm also a Mashiach, I'm a Messianic Jew. All that means is you go look back to Jesus's followers way back in the day. They were Jews that followed him, and that's where I'm at. So that's pretty much the short of it. Real quick, I am the author of a couple of books, The Rooted Kingdom, The Rooted Kingdom, Solving the Riddle of the Church, of Israel, the Church and the Kingdom. And so if you want to check that out, go ahead and do that. Where on Amazon, I think is probably the easiest way to get it. So yeah, that's the short of it.
Nope. And I got your books and I will be reading them. I'm about 6 books deep right now. I'm trying to catch up on all the books.
You get that pile next to your bed. It just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. Dave, we actually, we're going to talk about Iran, folks. There's no doubt about it. And kind of, I wanted to talk to Dave and get his perspective on what's going on from the Israeli perspective and how this impacts them and what they're seeing. But we also talked about right before this show, the importance of determining what objective truth is. Talk a little bit about that, Dave.
Yeah, it's extremely important. I think, watching with all the great work that you've done on the Charlie Kirk assassination, and then just the daily questions that I deal with regarding my faith and being in Israel and everything that we have to deal with regarding all the lies that are spread about us. And it really does ring warning bells of where we are as a society of not being able to have, I think, productive discourse among each other. And most of that's just because that people actually aren't interested in what's true. They're only interested in what makes them feel good about any given situation. Yeah. They want their current worldview to be supported by the things that they're putting into their minds. And that's actually the opposite of how we should be operating, right? We should be wanting to align our worldviews with what is true. And unfortunately, that's really not how people operate. as we all know. But and the reality is that I genuinely think that people like, the proverbial Tucker Carlsons and Candace Owens of the world, et cetera. I think that they think that what they believe is true many times. Now, sometimes they know that they're grifting, or they know that they're maybe being disingenuous just to push a worldview or to push an agenda, and that certainly happens. And something I heard, Jeremy Boring say recently was that Tucker Carlson told him to his face that he would lie for power. And so obviously we know that happens, and that there are those people, but that shouldn't be where we want to be as human beings. I mean, I believe in God. I believe that we are responsible for our actions. I think that we are under his authority. And because we're under that authority, and because I do believe that there are consequences to our actions, not just, the temporary consequences that we see in daily life. If I rob a bank, I go to jail, but eternal consequences. I firmly believe that how we position ourselves towards truth affects eternal consequences, right? The things that will happen to us in eternity based upon what we actually believe. And that's not, that might not be true, right? But I believe that's true. And the way that we come to why we believe something true is extremely important. And there's actually what I call 6 truths about truth that help us determine any given event or belief system. We can actually apply these to that and help us to kind of walk through whether or not what Gary is saying or what David's saying or whomever is actually telling the truth.
No, that's great. And I think this is something that needs to be discussed, because what I've seen is more and more we're getting to where, like, people are not grounded in truth. They're grounded in whatever they like. Like, it's this like reality relativism that we're seeing more and more of. And it used to not be that way. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and we were definitely much more evidence and fact-based. Why do you think that has changed so much?
I think that we have evolved, back in the 50s, 60s, pretty much everybody had, regardless of political persuasion, people had a fundamental belief in some kind of a higher authority, God, and that our rights still came, our moral boundaries still came from God. Okay. And I think that we are very much in a it's even beyond postmodern. This is a post-God period of time where people fundamentally fight for an atheistic worldview, a materialist worldview that says we don't get our rights from God. We get our rights from whatever I want to believe is right or wrong. When I say rights, I mean morals. So people's moral values and duties are now based upon their political persuasion or their sexual worldview, instead of, 50, 60, 80 years ago, pretty much everybody agreed, okay, yeah, murder's wrong, hurting kids is wrong, rape is wrong. There's just men and women, if the whole idea of a trans person was extremely out there, because that's just where we are in society. We are in a post-biblical worldview, and not that everybody was believing in God back then, or that everybody believed in the Bible, but society itself was structured around this common view of, okay, you might have a little different view than I do. Maybe you're Catholic, maybe you're Jewish, maybe you're a Hindu guy, that the one guy on the block or whatever. But our society is built upon a constitution that is grounded in a biblical faith that the founders founded the country on. I'm just talking about what the Western, America, obviously, but the UK, you can lump a lot of Europe in back in the 50s and 60s in this too. And that's gone now, right? I mean, that is just antiquated, antique mentality. And I think the ultimate reason is because, again, people don't want a moral arbiter upon them, right? They don't want a morality that can tell them what to do. And because of that, that's where we find ourselves. And so the easiest way to proceed as a human being, if you don't want if you don't want morality to govern your life, is to be a moral relativist. Just whatever I want to be moral right and wrong is going to be morally right and wrong.
So basically, once people start believing in moral relativism, everything's relativist at that point, including our own reality and what we determine that we're going to accept as fact. No, I think that's on point. I've talked about that many times on the show, and it's harder to convince people. And, a great example of this, I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking about everything that's been going on since the death of Charlie Kirk, and, these different conspiracy theories that people have pushed. And it's wild to watch, to sit back and look at someone say, no, it was definitely a palm gun. 100% it was a palm gun. And then like a week later, that same person is saying, nope, it was definitely a camera gun. 100%. I staked my life on it. Then we moved to, I don't even know anymore. Like we just jump from one thing to another. And these people are certain. They are certain that this is true. And the reason that they can jump from one thing to another, as well as like many people that jump from religion to religion, is because it's not grounded in evidence. And it's easy to abandon it. It's easy to pick up and it's easy to abandon it. And it's not principle based. And that's the difference between, somebody that is looking for objective truths as opposed to something that they just enjoy, they like, they grab onto that, they latch onto that, and now they believe that, and then they look for evidence to support that. But once they find something else that appeals to them more, they can jump onto that bandwagon.
Yeah, there's been a lot of distrust, and I feel it myself.
Sure.
And I didn't go and fight in the Middle East like you did, but I know a lot of my friends did, and a lot of them came back saying, and we've never talked about this, so I'm curious about it from you, but a lot of them came back, why were we there? Why did my friends die? Why did my leg get blown off? What was this all for? And so there is distrust that has developed in our country over the past, let's just say 25 years, 26 years now. I think it all beginning with 9/11, there's questions there too, but with people saying, I don't trust the government anymore. And then that extends to not trusting any authority, which, look, I'm okay with not trusting people, all right? Trust but verify, right? But instead of becoming a skeptic, which I think is a healthy position, people become cynics. And cynics, generally speaking, are not interested in any evidence to inform their worldview, right? They're only interested in what's going to feed, again, that emotional inner self that makes them feel best about who they are at the moment, best about who that authority that they thought was wrong is, and then it just balloons from there. And the interesting about the moral relativism is that mentality of moral relativism now bleeds over into like basic facts, like 2 + 2 can no longer be 4. So it's now things that should be scientifically held with certainty now it's almost like they're relativized into things that at that point there is no conversation. Like I think about this a lot, and it makes me think of, because of the Charlie Kirk thing, I've done a lot of tabling at University of Utah, and you get furries walking through the halls, people in cat costumes, like the whole 9 yards of kind of crazy belief systems that you end up talking to, and they're all in the matrix. Like it's really hard to have a conversation with these students now because they don't believe anything is actually real, right? And at that point, when there's no objective standard of what you're having a conversation about, it's almost useless to have a conversation.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And that is the difference. Going back not that long ago, we could at least agree on some basic facts, and now those are completely thrown out the window. So let's talk about that. Let's give some people some tools out there so they can determine what is real and what is not.
Yeah, so I thought it would be fun. I was telling Gary, if we went through, I did a video called 6 Truths About Truth, and I think it's going to be interesting to walk through what he knows about the Charlie Kirk assassination and apply these 6 truths about truth. And they're going to help. I think if you just take these and you can apply them to any scenario, you can apply them to your religious beliefs, you can apply them to your political beliefs, your political platforms, and really test the waters to see if something holds out to be true. So first and foremost, we have to actually talk about what does something mean to be true? And I hold to what's called the correspondence theory. And the correspondence theory is just that truth is that which corresponds to reality, right? So right now I'm sitting in my office in the Galilee in Israel. You're in, I'm assuming, West Virginia. You've got a blue button-up shirt on. You've got a beard, wearing a couple of watches. Like, these are things that correspond to reality. Right now, this thing behind me, that is not a painting. That's a TV. All right. These books over here to my right, the ones at the top, those are real books. The ones below those are actually pieces of wood that I glued fake printout books to, so it would look, so I could just fill up the shelf because I didn't have enough books back there, right? So, but you could come into my office and examine these things to be true. Now, those are things that correspond to reality, and events are no different. So the Charlie Kirk assassination, whatever went on that day, how many people were there, whether or not the person that they arrested for the assassination really committed the crime, whether or not it was the gun that he used, whether or not it was a microphone that somehow Israelis smuggled explosives into, and that's what really killed him. Like, all of these things are, I guess, possibilities. They might not be plausible, but they are possibilities that then you have to go and examine to see if they correspond to reality. So the first truth about truth is all truth is discovered. And that means that one of the most common examples of this is that before Isaac Newton discovered gravity, were we all floating around in the air? No, of course not, right? So it's not like everybody was floating in space and then Newton discovered gravity and then everybody got sucked down to the earth. It had nothing to do with what Newton discovered. Gravity always existed. We kind of still don't even really know what it is. But what he did was he described what we know as gravity. He discovered this thing, he put a name to it, and now we have what we describe as gravity, when things are sucked to objects that are larger than them, right? So the first thing, I guess, to ask you, Gary, is like, what are some key things that either people are confused about or they don't want to believe or whatever, but that you've discovered about the Charlie Kirk assassination that you think should really frame the discussion about truth regarding the event?
I would say that it was a lot less complicated than people made it out to be. You know, when we first, as a matter of fact, I just watched a video last night where a guy was talking about this. Number one, the distance is not that far. You don't have to be some like trained sniper to shoot 138 yards. It's a very easy shot. I have a video of me standing and shooting, doing the same thing. So that was not difficult. There's not a lot of complexity in that. The planning of it didn't take a lot. You need to have some basic familiarization of the facility that you could gain on like Google Earth. So overall, I think one of the biggest things is that it was much simpler than people made it out to be. And especially with kids today that are playing these, you know, everything from Call of Duty, where they are tactically learning to plan and execute missions. And with all the other resources that we have, like Google Earth and 3D mapping and everything else, it's not that hard. And who knows? I think that it's very, and there's evidence of this, that Tyler Robinson actually went to the location to do some pre-attack planning as well. So I think that's one of the biggest things that is kind of muddied the water from the very beginning. And I didn't realize that till I went there. Like the on the ground, like, wow, that is, the distances of these is not that far. You don't have to be Spider-Man to scale the roofs. You literally walk up to a public walkway, step over a rail, and you're on the roof. Wow. So I think that was one of the biggest things. And I think that's one of the things that muddied the water and people latched onto at the beginning, is like, this was some big, you know, sophisticated plan. There's no way this 22-year-old kid could do that. And I think that is probably one of the biggest truths to this entire thing that people don't realize.
Was that the same thing with the Butler attempt as well?
Yeah, I mean, Butler is very similar in that regard. There was nothing complex about it. I mean, there's always some questions as to I don't have a lot of questions left with like why security wasn't doing what it was doing, but right. Butler, it's a little more complicated. I'll say that. But yeah, okay. The forward approach to planning and execution is just that. It was pretty simple.
Yeah. So once you got into discovery mode of, okay, let me go there, I'm going to check it out, all of a sudden you start discovering things that just clear everything up, yeah. Right? At least a lot of these questions. Maybe not the ammunition, maybe not the gun, maybe not yada, yada, yada. Sure. But initially you're like, okay, this is definitely doable. It didn't have to be some, 20-man conspiracy, Mossad job with Egyptian planes coming in and all this stuff, right? And, kind of one thing that I'm not sure how it totally affects this specific discussion, but the number two here, the second truth about truth, is that truth is transcultural. And what that means is it's if something is true, it's true for all people in all times and all places. And this specific event doesn't really have maybe a worldwide effect, at least that we know of yet. But one thing that specifically, that I talk about pretty frequently is that if we just go to, let's just say, the claims of Christianity, in that, Jesus of Nazareth was a real person, real time and real space. He had a ministry. He claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed to be the Messiah of Israel, which means the King of Israel. And he was crucified, and he was buried for 3 days. He rose on the third day, and his disciples died for that belief. Okay, so this is an event in history that somebody living in the Amazon at that time had no idea that it happened. Okay, but it didn't mean that it wasn't true just because that person didn't know about it. So if something is true, it's true for all people in all times and all places, not just at that time an event, but also 2,000 years later, that event in history, if it is what if Jesus is who he says he was, then that has an effect on your life, regardless of what you believe about it, or even if you ever heard about it. So it might, who knows what will happen? There's been repercussions because of Charlie Kirk's murder, and who knows what those might be. But, somebody in, rural China right now probably isn't affected by the event whatsoever, yet it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Okay. I don't know. Is there anything you can think about where that might kind of play a role here as far as like the event being transcultural?
No, but I mean, just in regard to that, sometimes you have to change your perspective to see the truth, right? And that even goes back to discovery of this. And I think that's really important, to be open to, if you're actually interested in the truth, sometimes you have to change your perspective and open yourself to ideas that you might have once rejected, to be sure.
Yeah. So number 3 here is truth is unchanging. And essentially it just means that whatever the events of that day, and I want to get your opinion on this regarding like what you think we know, what do we know now, and what might come out in the courts later when they actually have the trial. But the facts on the ground as they are now are always going to be the facts on the ground, right? And so it's completely unchanging. And our beliefs about the event don't make the event change at all, either way. So we should, I guess my point is like, we should allow the discovery of the events, right? And the facts on the ground are what don't change. Therefore, the only thing that can change is our opinion about it, right? So what are some of these, what are some facts right now that you are pretty confident that this is not going to change, from here going forward, whether it's the gun or the ballistics or the person or whatever it is, number of shooters, this is not going to change. And so these are facts that we as people on the outside looking in need to change our belief system to match the facts on the ground.
Well, one of the things that went around for a long time, and is still pushed to some extent, is that, Tyler Robinson was never on campus. Not only do we currently have, and not long after he was after the event, did we have fairly clear footage of the fact that Tyler Robinson was there. He actually went on campus twice that day, kind of did a pre-attack surveillance, confirming that where the target was going to be, that the vulnerabilities were still there, and then came back to actually execute it. And I think that is going to be so solidly confirmed come the trial when they do release all the additional footage. There's over 2,000 cameras on UVU. We have GPS and location data from the phones. We have GPS and location data from his vehicle. Like, we have DNA, we have fingerprints on the roof. Like, it is extremely clear that he was definitely there, that he was the shooter. But I think that's going to be doubly confirmed once we see the trial and see additional evidence.
How much of the ballistic evidence do you think we're going to see like autopsy report type stuff and the whole question of the round not exiting, all that kind of stuff? Do you think that will be cleared up?
I don't know if it'll ever be perfectly cleared up for most people, but what the jury will see and the defense will see, I don't think that we're going to see it from the public side, but they will see autopsy reports. They will see things that confirm, that eliminate all the other options. And I think ultimately, even with the 30-06, look, I've said from the beginning that, we kind of have an anomaly with a fairly close shot. I think it's less of an anomaly once I started reading into it and actually researching this. When you start looking at Chuck Ritter, Martin Luther King, there's another guy I just found out about the other day, Shane Hill. There are clear examples, and even more so when I've looked through military and pathology reports where folks, 30-06 hitting human beings and not having an exit wound is definitely much more common than people realize, more than I realize. I mean, I don't sit around and read terminal ballistic reports on human beings prior to this. Right. So there's a lot of prejudice going into this, or this idea, these preconceived notions of what a 30-06 will or will not do. And that is even, and we were coming to these conclusions, and even myself to some extent, before we even knew what the round was, before we knew anything about the ammunition. We still don't know anything about the rifle. We don't know if that round was stabilized. I think, and this is kind of where I've come to with all of this. Once I went to UVU, I look at the charging documents and go through the different search warrants and all the other, like, it doesn't matter ultimately if it was 1 in a million shot. There's no other alternative. Just through the process of elimination, you come to, hey, that was Tyler Robinson on the roof. It was his rifle. It was a 30-06. And what happened happened. And by the way, it's not even close to being unprecedented.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, well, a couple things here. I was in a car ride with a buddy of mine who's a pastor up in Canada. And we were discussing it. This was, I don't know, a while back. It was in the winter. But, he's a hunter. I grew up hunting. I always used a 30-30. I think he uses a 30-06 or something similar, 30 caliber round. But, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. And he was very convinced that whatever was coming out was not true because of his experience hunting using, a similar round or whatever. And this is before, I knew about you and listened to any of the, kind of ballistic stuff that you went over, which is extremely interesting and completely enlightening once you start digging into this. But that brings me to number 4 here, which is belief or sincerity of a belief doesn't matter, right? And a lot of times we come to our beliefs because of lived experience, right? It's like, oh, I've been hunting for 30 years and I've never had that happen, and I use the same round.
Yeah.
And then there's a conversation. They're like, well, okay, what round did you use? Well, what round did he use? Well, I don't really know for sure. Okay, well, there's a question mark, right? Did you know that there's these 10 different types of, bullets that can be put in a 30-06 round or whatever it is, like there's different tips and different materials on the inside, you can manipulate the bullet to stop on impact, and all these mercury rounds, all kinds of crazy stuff that people do to bullets, right? So we don't know if it's tampered with, but I mean, I understand why people have the beliefs and the sincerely held beliefs that they do because of their experience hunting and all these kinds of things. But the fact is, when we look at just, okay, these truths about truth, your sincerity or my sincerity or my buddy's sincerity on that belief doesn't actually affect whether it's true or false, right? It again, it kind of soothes our own lived experience that will go, I'm basing my decision on something that I've seen 100 times. Okay, but there aren't apples and apples here. We're comparing apples and kiwis or something, So I guess what is two things here. I know that you've seen it. Like the sincerity of people is definitely real, and why they might disagree with you, right, on some of the conclusions you've come to. Yeah. But also, I lost my train of thought here. But the point here is that that belief of those people can't change those facts, and neither can your belief about the subject, right? It's like the facts are the facts. We have opinions on them. We have beliefs about them, but the sincerity of those beliefs doesn't actually change what's true.
Yeah, and the other part of that is that we all of us suffer a little bit from, Dunning-Kruger, right? One of the examples, people drive cars for 20, 30, 40 years. Doesn't mean that you're a race car driver. Doesn't mean that you actually understand, vehicle dynamics. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'll take you out to the track. We'll do a high performance driving course, and you'll see real quick that you don't know half of what you think you know. Mm-hmm. So, the other thing to realize is like these tangential experiences doesn't make us a subject matter expert. And what the real problem here that we suffer from is that we don't know what we don't know. Yeah, and we see this all the time. And then it's like, somebody like me, I'm like, look, this is ballistics or this is explosives. You can't get away from this. And they'll just reject it outright and be like, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're paid by Israel, or you're paid by the federal government to tell me these things. And they have to hold on to this belief because it really, some of these beliefs that they're holding on to is the foundation of the rest of the story that they're holding on to, which is, this multinational, multi-agency conspiracy to murder Charlie Kirk. But yeah, the fact is we don't know half of what we think we know.
And that should be a tell for people. I mean, look, we don't have we have information, right, about the assassination, but certainly nothing compared, at least maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't think we have much of the percentage of information that certainly like the cops have, right, or the investigators have. They have mountains upon mountains of information. And I encourage people, there's a guy named J. Warner Wallace. He has a book out. He has a bunch of books. They're all really good. But one of them is called God's Crime Scene. And he was a cold case homicide detective for 30 years in Southern California. Have you heard of this guy?
No, I haven't.
Really interesting guy. He was an atheist. Somebody challenged him. He said, look, you're the best cold case detective in the world. But you're an atheist. You've never even examined the resurrection of Jesus, or the alleged resurrection.
I've heard of his story before now that you're mentioning it.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy, really neat guy. But so he examined it, and he actually ended up becoming a believer, because once he examined it, he realized, actually, this fits all of the truth claims that I would look for in any case. But in God's Crime Scene, which is really a book about the creation of the world and how we know that it had to be an outside entity, he talks about all these really interesting things about, okay, if you have a crime scene, or you have a body in a room and you show up, just what are all the things that an investigator looks for to determine whether this was a murder or just some guy that died, right? So you walk into a room and then the guy's there and he's dead, and there's a window open, and you turn over the body and there's a knife in his stomach. Okay, well, something happened, right? Like somebody from outside came in. And so so we know some things, like if we're entering that crime scene, if anything, we're the guy on the street, maybe at the OJ murder that got a 100-yard shot of the crime scene and don't know anything else at this point. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, we have some evidence, but from people's cell phones and eyewitnesses that maybe we talk to somebody, or we can go there and look at whatever, but nothing compared to what the evidence is going to come out in court. But even what we do have regarding the evidence for the Charlie Kirk assassination, I guess the ultimate thing where I was going with this, sometimes I go in a loop that never connects, but is that obviously I believe that the whole blaming the Jews thing is just satanic, but there's no evidence for any of that. But yet that's where people want to jump to. And it's like, look, if your immediate reaction is to hate on another human being because you don't understand what happened, I think there's bigger problems going on, right? And the bigger problem is you need a right relationship with God to understand that you need to love your neighbor as yourself and treat other people as human beings. Anyway, I digress. But anyway, beliefs and sincerity don't matter when it comes to all this stuff. Number 5 is the attitude of the one professing the truth claim doesn't matter. Gary, out of all the people you've interacted with about this, have you interacted with anyone that you really didn't like their attitude, but what they said was true?
I do that on a daily basis. That's with my wife.
Right?
I do that.
Yeah. Well, it's the old adage. You
but I know it's true. You're right. I don't even want to admit
I don't like the way you're telling it to me, but you are right. And that's something that, look, Gary can be a jerk. I can be a total D-bag bringing you some information, but our attitude doesn't change whether that information is true or false.
Well, isn't that also like the appeal and the hate that goes toward Donald Trump? I mean, yes. we recognize some very universal truths, but some of it that he says, but some of the way, sometimes his delivery, even for big fans of him, like, people like me, like, probably could get a little more diplomatic.
A little more vinegar than honey there. Yeah, for sure. But to me, it's a warning. I always kind of tell myself it's a warning of, I want to make sure I'm not believing things because somebody that told it to me was really likable. Yeah. Or they had a silk tongue, or whatever that might be, as far as maybe they were really attractive.
Yeah, and speaking of which, going back to, I was pulling this up on your last point too, but this goes right into this one. Is here's a tweet from Ian Carroll, and if you folks watch Ian Carroll, no matter what video that he puts out, it'll be on 50 different topics. The end conclusion is always, it was the Jews.
Yeah.
I'll just save you the time. It's the Jews. But here we have, I want you guys to look at the date on this. 7:07 a.m. Eastern time on September 11th, 2025. Yesterday was a turning point for Israel-U.S. relations. Less than 24 hours, the internet already figured out the most likely culprit is. He was their friend. He basically dedicated his life to them, and they murdered him in front of his family. Israel just shot themselves. So here we have a conclusion based on no evidence available, zero evidence available. And we were already being, they were already putting out propaganda so that people started buying into this. And of course, and there's a lot of people that like Ian Carroll. At one time, I even liked Ian Carroll. Can't stand him now. I knew sort of what he was about, but he's a likable person, and his videos are enjoyable to watch. But they are full of absolute brain rot. And by the way, most importantly, they're full of absolute lies. And that's where I found out who he really was. I started going through his videos and like, all right, seems very convincing, very compelling. Let me go through and fact check these individual points. And time after time after time, it was a twist of reality or just an outright lie every single time.
Yeah, and the really sick part is the 103,000 likes on that video, on that text or that tweet.
12 million views.
Yeah, just crazy.
12 million views.
Yeah, that was depressing. Thanks, Gary. All right. So again, attitude doesn't matter. You got to be careful, folks. Number 6, though, is that all truths are absolute truths. And to deny that is to confirm it. So if you don't believe that absolute truths are absolute, or all the truths are absolute, you're actually confirming. If you say there are no absolute truths, you're making an absolute truth claim. So if something is true, again, it's true for all people in all times and all places, and it's absolutely true. There's no variation in it. And that can be whether it's a thought, if something is philosophically true or logically true, 2 + 2 is 4, if it's a math problem, if it's an event like the Charlie Kirk assassination. These are absolute things that happened. Or let's just say, if you want to put a biblical spin on it, even in prophecy, we can look in the Bible, things that were predicted to happen. If they didn't come true in that way, then it wasn't true. So you can actually look at it from that standpoint. But their absolute truth claims are always absolutely true claims. Now, but there's a difference here, and this, I think this really does get into, there are definitely some things that here about the Charlie Kirk assassination that people kind of fall victim of, is that, as you said earlier, like, people treat their worldview and their idea of truth like it's, I don't know if you use this exact language, but like it's a flavor of ice cream. Like it's just the flavor of the week of what they want to believe that, makes them feel good or whatever. But there are, within absolute truth, we have subjective truths and we have objective truths. And people think that that means there's relativity in truth, but there's not, okay? Subjective truth just means that it's true for all people in all times and all places that my favorite ice cream is chocolate. Okay, I'll just say that. And for Gary, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Mint chocolate chip.
Mint chocolate chip. Okay. Now, people will say, well, that's relative to those people. No, we're not talking about relativity here. It's true for all people in all times and all places. I like chocolate. Gary likes mint chocolate chip. Those are absolute truths about us. Okay. And going on. So yeah, I told you that was a TV. And now then there's objective truths. Okay. And objective truths mean these are things like morality, that it's true for all people in all times and all places that murder is wrong. Okay. That rape is wrong. It's not just a preference. And so that's when we look to, okay, does God exist? If God exists, then we are morally accountable to something outside of ourselves. I don't know, as far as like the subjective, objective thing here, do you see any correlation there with everything that you've looked at with the Charlie Kirk stuff? Maybe people confusing the two? Of course, I might have just confused everybody about both of those.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that has been used to cast suspicion on people and events is the interpretation of people's body language, what's happening, how people react to a traumatic event. A great example is, we have Mikey McCoy, suddenly Charlie's shot and he just turns. There's other people going through and slowing things down and subjectively interpreting like everything from hand movements to other things that they're doing that. And if we just looked at it objectively, we wouldn't see anything that looks suspicious. Mm-hmm. But when we narrative frame and we put that inception into people's minds, like, okay, look, I'm getting ready to show you something and watch how suspicious this person is. Now we are introducing subjective elements of this that can be interpreted 50 ways, but it always goes to the worst way when people that are grifting, that are trying to convince people that there is a conspiracy theory, it's not even looked at objectively. So, they've done a good, what pants Erica Kirk wears. Look, oh my God, why would she do that? Is she grieving? People don't grieve like that. This is like, oh God, she has pyrotechnics. There's smoke. They're celebrating Charlie's life. So that has been used. That has been weaponized to an extent that I don't think people really even understand.
Yeah. Another one that kind of strikes me of combining the last one here with number 4, when we make someone else's. So let's just say, one of my best friends, Aaron Marshall, was there. He was probably 20 feet in front of Charlie when he was killed. So I heard his account of it, and he gave me a rundown. But if I treat Aaron's eyewitness testimony, which is full of emotion and a relative experience, okay, it was subjective to him, but it's a relative experience. If I treat his opinion about what happened when he didn't hear the gunshot, he just saw the event, right? He didn't know anything else that happened. He just had a very narrow view. Now, it doesn't mean his testimony doesn't mean anything, but if I'm determining, and then let's just say from that, he tells me 20 different things, which he doesn't know for sure, he can't prove, but he's like, this is what happened based upon what I saw. And let's just say it disagrees with everything that you've put forth on your channel. Sure. Now I'm going off of his belief and his sincerity as being objectively true, when the reality is I'm just adopting his sincerity to be a discovered fact about what really happened, when I can't do that, right? I'm just using his personal experience. Now, it doesn't mean that, again, this kind of gets into gray areas of eyewitness testimony. It doesn't mean that eyewitness testimonies are always faulty. They're not, certainly not. But sometimes when they're bifurcated or they're just one tiny sliver of the pie, we have to be careful on what we actually kind of boil out of that, if you will. That's pretty much, that was all the 6 truths about truth. And I think it was kind of an interesting case to study with all the work that you've done with the Charlie Kirk assassination. I don't know, any closing thoughts on that before? I know you want to get into other stuff with the Iran.
Let's just go through and recap those for people to kind of take away.
Sure. Yeah. So again, this is the correspondence theory. So when you're thinking about truth, it's that which corresponds to reality. Really be asking yourself these questions of, am I believing this because it's real, or because it just kind of makes me feel good about who I am today and the choices I've made, right? And the beliefs that I already have. But number 1 is all truth is discovered. Okay. We don't invent things to be true. We discover them to be true. All truth is transcultural. So truth is, if something is true for all people in all times and all places. Number 3, truth is unchanging. Whatever happened, or whatever is true about something, whether it's philosophically true or logically true or an event that happened, it never changes. Okay. Because it corresponds with the world, the real world around us. Number 4, belief or sincerity doesn't change a matter. It doesn't change a fact. What you believe about it doesn't change. The attitude, number 5, of someone professing that truth or fact doesn't change the fact itself. And then finally, all truths are absolute, but we have subjective truths and objective truths within absolute truth itself. So write these down, study them, explore how you can apply them to different areas of your life. And I think they really do help. I know they help me all the time, particularly like my daily Bible study and that kind of stuff. When I'm confronted with something that I'm like, man, I kind of believe something else than what I think this is saying. But if I want to go with what the reality is about this, then I need to examine, okay, why do I believe this? Have I discovered something that should change my belief about it, or vice versa? So.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. And this is literally part of the scientific method that we've kind of thrown out. But, number one is having some humility, understanding that we could be wrong, that we could be missing something. We've all been there. We've all believed something to be true and then come to find out it was incorrect. The other thing is, once you do latch onto something, especially when we're talking about something as serious like the perceived events or the mechanisms or suspects that we want to throw into the Charlie Kirk assassination, it's really important that you go try to prove yourself wrong. Prove yourself wrong. Like, why would this not be true? And that's something that I've done throughout this. And because your detractors are going to, your critics are going to, you might as well go try to prove yourself wrong to make sure that it's solid and you understand the arguments against it, because you've already put forth those arguments against your own belief system or your own theories. And then it's much easier to defend. So I think approaching all of this with some humility is really important. And you can apply that to whether we're talking about religion, whether we're talking about other belief systems, whatever it is. No, I think that was really important. And you said you did a whole video on that as well?
Yeah.
Jen, make sure that we put the link to that video down in the description below. And again, folks, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. Down in the description below are all Dave's links as well. So make sure you go follow him and support him on social media. But the other thing that I want to talk about too is kind of your perspective of what's going on with Iran. We have sort of a ceasefire that's clearly been violated multiple times at this point. I got to be honest with you, I was not happy with the elements. It wasn't as bad as they made it out to be. I think we started hearing about the MOU on like a Monday, was finally released on a Thursday. Between that time, we had heard all kinds of propaganda that was coming straight from Iran that our media pushed out, said it was true. And again, I think really muddied the water and tainted and corrupted people's perception of what was going on. With that being said, doesn't look like a good deal. And then on top of that, once I start hearing JD Vance talk about it and starts talking about IEA inspectors, seems like we're going back to a JCPOA. So you're there in Israel. I'd like to hear your perspective on what's going on there.
I think one of the things that's been spouted over and over and over again from the kind of the JD Vance crowd is who's that other guy that's so dislikable now? He was, I can't remember. Anyway, there's so many. The idea of the forever war. We don't want to fight forever wars.
Yeah.
The way you fight a forever war is exactly what they did, in my opinion. You appease your enemy.
Agreed.
You make it possible for them to survive. And obviously, JD Vance has been torn apart, and rightly so, for the comments that he made about World War II, that we negotiated at the end of World War II. We did not negotiate. We defeated the Nazis. We defeated Japan. We dropped nukes on these people so that they would surrender, flat out, period. Germany no longer had a military after that, right? So there are specific things that we did. We won victory. The most disturbing thing about the MOU, and nobody is really talking about this, at least maybe there's like one guy I've heard maybe mention this, is that people don't understand that when Trump says that he's eliminated 2 other regimes, and now they're talking with a regime that's more, I don't know what the word is.
Radical?
Yeah, I mean, that's just maybe, well, he says is less radical, right? The person that is now running Iran is a guy named Ghalibaf. Ghalibaf is the individual who threatened a coup against the Ayatollah, the first Ayatollah that was killed, not his gay son, but the first Ayatollah.
Yeah.
And the coup was, look, this was back in 1999, I think it happened the first time, when Iranians rose up against the government. And he said, if you don't allow us to go and shoot all of these protesters right now, I will form a coup against you and remove you from office. That's who Ghalibaf is. And so Ghalibaf is the person that has been out there killing tens of thousands of Iranians in the street. He is actually the most radical figure that the U.S. has dealt with at this point in time. And he is the very person that Trump and Vance are telling us is the most reasonable. And nothing could be further from the truth. He is literally the point of the spear, the finger pulling the trigger on the Iranian people. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize. And you can do your own research on that. Again, work that out to see if what I'm saying is true. But you're going to find that this guy is a really, really bad actor. So that's probably the most disturbing thing that's come out of this whole thing. Obviously, that they survived. And look, I know that wasn't regime change in Iran wasn't always the point for the United States. And I totally get that. What bothers us as Israelis is that it's fine if you want to come in and you want to partner with us and you want to do some damage against the nuclear program. We welcome that. We are super thankful for that. And we really do see that as a partnership because we know what we did on our end, and it was no less than what the U.S. did on their end. Okay, we are certainly minimum 50-50 partners, if not more, Israelis fighting as far as like fighter jets and all that kind of stuff goes. Okay, so we are at least 50-50 partners in this thing. But for the United States to then sign an MOU, which specifically leaves Israel out of the negotiations, and then leverage upon us as if we were part of it so that we had to do a ceasefire in Lebanon is completely, it's just insane to us, okay? Because the reality is that from the very beginning of the signing of the MOU and the alleged ceasefire between the US and Iran, it was supposed to, I think the first line item on there was a ceasing of all activities in Lebanon, which included Israeli activities in Lebanon. Never mind that Hezbollah, and this is another thing, like Hezbollah is not just a proxy of Iran. Hezbollah is Iran, okay? It's no different than the United States having a forward operating base supplying its own troops, okay? It's no different than that. In fact, Nasrallah, who was one of the first guys that we took out in the whole beeper bombing thing, we hit him with a missile, not a beeper, but he came from Iran. And there's actually really good evidence. Israeli intelligence now tells us that Nasrallah had more to do with operations in Iran militarily than any indigenous Iranian, meaning like not indigenous, but like an Iranian living there, okay? Nasrallah really did control military policy in Iran, and he was living in Beirut. And so there was never a ceasefire. All the language that there's been a ceasefire with Iran, that never happened. Why? Because Hezbollah has attacked us every single day since the MOU. Another thing that I think that, sorry, I'll keep going forever here if you don't interrupt me, Gary. So,
I'll keep going.
Another thing that I think people don't realize is that when we kind of go back to the discussion about what's going on in Lebanon, because that is literally Iran attacking an ally of the United States, Israel. We are defending ourselves, and yes, we have pushed past what the quote border is with Lebanon to do that, and we are taking up space as a buffer zone, a demilitarized zone, if you will, between Lebanon and Israel, because our borders are literally touching each other, and you have a house occupied by Hezbollah 100 meters from our border, and they are shooting missiles into our citizens and killing our citizens and firing these suicide drones, etc. And we're pushing that back so that they can no longer have line of sight to hit people with anti-tank missiles or to fly these fiber optic zones, about a 20-kilometer limit on these things. So we're trying to push into that 20-kilometer zone so that they can't hit our civilians anymore. But what nobody ever talks about is that Lebanon has never recognized Israel as a sovereign nation. Never. Lebanon's never recognized Israel as a sovereign nation. Syria's never recognized Israel as a sovereign nation. So when people want to complain about us pushing past a border, what border are you talking about? Draw a line on a map where both Lebanon and Israel have decided this is where our country ends and your country begins, because that's never happened from a Lebanese standpoint. Now, Israel has withdrawn to specific lines, whether it was the 96 Lebanon War or the 2006 or 2004 Lebanon War, or whatever it was. There are different points of which we've withdrawn to and put a fence up, but there's no recognized border. And so to have peace with somebody, they have to actually recognize that you exist. And that has never happened. And so it is so incredibly complicated when people start talking about Israel invading Syria or Israel invading Lebanon or this and that. I say, okay, fine, show me a border that both people recognized that they wouldn't cross, and we'll go by that. But it's never happened. And so there are just so many factors about this that nobody ever wants to discuss. I say nobody, like mainstream media are certainly Israel critics, because either A, they're so ignorant they don't know to talk about it, or B, they do know it and they don't want to talk about it because it just paints Israel in a better light, because we are always the party that's wanting to end the conflict. We're always the party that has offered real borders, recognition of statehood. To their stated goal is to wipe us off the map, wipe us off the face of the earth. So again, super, super complicated, but that's really a big part of it. One more thing, this was super annoying. When the remarks that JD Vance made, and there's a lot of stuff that Trump said too, but they were so telling about, I think, one, his understanding or lack of understanding of the region and conflict in general, but also just what an ally is. Yeah. You can have disagreements with your close allies, and that's totally fine. We do not have all the same interests all the time. And I totally understand that. Bibi understands that. Trump understands that. But what shocked Israelis was the demeanor and the language that was coming out of both Trump and Vance's mouth to throw us as an ally under the bus. Yeah. Saying, you can't kill your way out of every conflict. We don't kill our way out of every conflict. We've offered peace to the Palestinians now. We've offered statehood to them a minimum of 12 times, and they've rejected it every single time, with the only reason being that we still exist. And so we are literally the last country on earth that wants to fire another bullet. We are sick of it. We've had tens of thousands of our citizens die. I'm not talking about the army. I'm talking about just citizens die from this, just Palestinians shooting us, blowing us up. Same thing from Hezbollah and Syria, et cetera. So we are done with it. We don't want war. And that's such a known fact. It's such a known position from, just Israeli history. To come out and say the things that they said, it was really shocking. And it, to me, super telling of who JD Vance really is, and extremely worrisome, because a lot of what he now is saying about Israel, or his posture, is exactly what Tucker Carlson seems to believe. And it seems like they're buddies, and that is not good news.
No, I said the exact same thing last night. I don't care if it was with, if we were prosecuting a war with France, for instance, and I hate France. Yeah. So, if we're prosecuting a war with France and they're our only ally, and you're trying to negotiate a peace deal, what you don't do is you don't come on TV and start airing those grievances. Hey, look, there's always going to be disagreements on operations. There's always going to be differences in grievances and just differences of opinion how things should be done. That's not something that you put out on television. All right. Yeah. You don't show that weakness or that rift to your enemies. That's just good strategic and tactical policy and diplomatic policy. And for JD Vance to come out and use some of the rhetoric that he did, that was I've been suspicious of JD Vance probably from the beginning, but more so in the last couple of months. And I also think, I don't think that Trump wants JD Vance to be the presidential nomination in 2028. And I think part of that, he was put out there to sell this turd. This was clearly a Department of State that should have been Rubio, and he would have been much better suited for it, by the way. And I think Trump threw him out there knowing that there was no good outcome. But then for JD Vance, and I don't know how much of what JD Vance said that Trump agrees with. I don't really even care. But, looking back, stepping back after that, and some of the other things that I've talked about, one of the things I said last night is I think this has been a plan from the beginning. I think that JD Vance was the Manchurian candidate of the woke right. He was friends with Trump, Carlson, and he said a lot of the exact same things that we know that Carlson was saying in text messages. He hated Trump, and then suddenly he did not anymore. And I do think this is part of the operation that I've been talking about, Project 2032, where they want us to lose the midterms. They want us to lose in 2028. Then Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and all these other people want to create this woke right wing of the party that's there to usurp the MAGA movement and have that opposition capabilities to where they're going to oppose the left. They're going to be the ones that come and fix it. MAGA couldn't do it. We're going to do it. We're going to break ties with Israel. We're going to become the super isolationist country. And that's the platform that they're running on. But yeah, I don't want to see JD Vance as of right now. I don't know. Maybe he'll come out and he'll completely change my mind. But right now, what I'd like to see is a Marco Rubio and Hegseth ticket come 2028 for sure. But I don't trust him. And I don't think he performed well just objectively outside of that, regardless of his intentions, regardless of his motives. I don't think he did a good job explaining what this was. And I'm not sure that you could do a good job explaining what this was, because this was nothing short of failure and capitulation on our end. Yeah. While we were operating from a huge position of strength, we have our boot on their neck. And I think for us to get 3/4 to 80% of the way there, maybe 90% of the way there, and not finish off the ROGC is, I think, just once again, us kicking the can down the road and ensuring that we do end up in a quagmire war, most likely with our children or grandchildren in a nuclear-armed Iran. And that is the worst possible scenario as far as I'm concerned.
It is. And this is the thing that really puzzles me. I can understand if the U.S., again, comes in, does something and says, all right, Israel, you take it from here. You know, we'll keep giving you some bombs if you need them or whatever, but we're out. Okay, cool. Yeah, fine. We'll take it from here. We're comfortable doing that. We're very comfortable doing that. And none of that would have happened without our intelligence anyway. We literally have Mossad agents living in Iran for decades to make this happen. What really bothers me, what really concerns me, is the relationship between the United States now and Qatar. People talk about Iran and how evil it is. It absolutely is. Iran wouldn't exist without Qatari money. And it is a very, very disturbing thing to me, you know, the gift of the plane. And people forget, like, Qatar houses Hamas. Hamas leaders don't live in Gaza. They live in Qatar. Islamic Jihad leaders, they don't live in Gaza. They live in Qatar. Palestinian Authority, a lot of those leaders, they don't live in the West Bank. A lot of them live in Qatar. Now, why is that? Because they don't want to live in the places that they're totally corrupting and make terrible to live in, first of all, but also because the money is in Qatar. So whenever the United States treats Qatar, the world's largest monetary sponsor of terror, better than its most strategic ally on the planet, which is Israel, it's a very, very disturbing thing to me. And I don't understand it. Like, I just don't understand how that could possibly be beneficial in any way, shape, or form, other than just money and oil, which I hate to go there, but maybe that's it. I genuinely don't know. I just know it's really disturbing.
Yeah, and for all the people that are so concerned about Israeli money coming into the U.S. or APAC or whatever else, folks, if you're not looking at the amount of money that Qatar is spending versus, and where they're spending it also, by the way, which they're investing a lot in education, which is not a good thing. Like, you're getting the cart before the horse. And if you're so worried about foreign influence and you're so concerned about Israel, like, you should definitely be looking at Qatar and at least have, I don't know, just a standard, like have some balance.
That's the thing. Like, Israel's only leverage over the U.S. realistically is our military prowess and willingness to fight. Yeah. We don't have money. We don't have oil, right? We have gas, natural gas. We have the largest natural gas fields in the world. But the reality is, the leverage that we have is that we're the guys that are saying, we'll do it. We will take that burden upon ourselves and carry that burden for as long as we have to. And we would love some help, but we don't. It's not like we would love the help. We will ask for help, but at the same time, we're always going to push that ball down the road ourselves and fight that battle, because if we don't, we won't survive.
Yeah, and obviously Israel. The other thing that is very beneficial about Israel is the location. And this is another thing that people don't understand. Like, I think China especially is pushing a lot of the stuff on social media to try to convince people that Israel and U.S. citizens, that Israel is so evil, we have to decouple from Israel. And folks, it's because China is trying to get their foot into Israel. They would love for them to replace us. They would love to have that ally for Israel and to have the strategic location of Israel to be able to project power the way that we do. And they're convincing Americans of things that are against your own interests. And you're just gobbling it down, these freaking antiquated tropes that were, as my buddy Green Beret Nap Time always says, these were, false narratives and propaganda was created for peasants back in the early 1900s. And we're just like, oh, Jews are the worst thing ever. But I want us to look at this. Qatar invests vastly more than in the U.S. than Israel by orders of magnitude. The bulk of it is Israel-related financial activity directed toward Gaza, often with Israel's past approval for stability purposes. Cumulative, at least $400 billion since 2000. And by the way, folks, they've just increased this. I pulled this up last night. Just in education alone, they've went to like 1.5 billion per year. They are getting their greasy little fingers in all of our colleges, our universities, because they understand. That's where the war is won. The war is not won through missiles. It is won through ideology and polluting Americans' minds to work against their own interests and their own country's interests. Pledges for the future, $500 billion additional from Qatar Investment Authority, $1.2 trillion economic commitment. FDI stock position, $4.7 billion. Spending investments in Israel related. Gaza Hamas related aid, $1 to $2 billion. Direct comparison scale, U.S. involvement is in the hundreds of billions, cumulative and pledged, dwarfing Gaza aid. Nature, U.S. primary commercial investment lobby in Gaza. And so, again, we have these people that are trying to invade our country through monetary means. I don't know if that was the exact correct prompt there, but we'll take a look at it. But the point is, research it for yourself, folks. Yeah. Qatar is spending billions of dollars to influence our country. It's not even close to what Israel is spending. And you can't have an honest discussion if you're worried about foreign money, but somehow every single time you're only worried about the pennies that Israel is spending or AIPAC is spending to influence elections, to influence the American people, while you're missing the billions of dollars that other foreign nations are spending in this country to influence the American people. Like, you're not an honest broker of information. You're not approaching this at all in any sort of good faith whatsoever. And like, people, for whatever reason, are very susceptible to this hate Israel, hate the Jews things. I don't know why. Research that for yourself. But it is people are susceptible to it. And I won't say especially on the right. This has been used on the left for a long time. As a matter of fact, this is one of the things that was kind of the principal elements of the Conservative Party is like, we are completely against the left. They are anti-Semitic. They are racist in so many different ways. Like, we're not going to associate with that. But that same brain rot is now all throughout the woke right, especially whether we're talking about Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. Like, all you got to do is show me. I just need to look at your profile for 2 seconds to figure out who you are. And if it's just, and these people are like, they're rabid about this. This is a religion unto itself. Like, their hate for Israel and their hate for Jews supersedes everything else. And it's just crazy to watch. We can have political disagreements with Israel. I think that's very rational and normal. We can have even a discussion here, how much money we should be investing in Israel and how much influence Israel should have on us. Perfectly rational discussion. But when it goes well beyond that, like Israel's controlling Trump, Jews control the world. Like, now you've just gone down a rabbit hole that I'm not willing to go. And it's just factually false. And now you're being propagandized. So,
yeah. And I think there's obviously a spiritual component here. And people you need to watch yourself. Like I said in the beginning, if you find yourself hating something, you need to ask yourself why. And if you're hating an individual or a people group or a country for that matter, that is literally the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, and you're taking the side of over 50 Islamic countries that colonized all of Central Asia, basically, whose side are you on? Like, this is extremely strange. You're literally backing Islam, which would slit your throat the first chance it gets, over a liberal democracy that not just allows Christianity, but we have Christians at the highest levels of government in Israel, and no one knows that. We have Muslims at the highest level of government. We have obviously Jews at the highest level of government, and it's just something that people are willfully ignoring because they believed a lie. And once you get to believe a spiritual lie like this, it really does begin to rot your ability to reason correctly.
Yeah, and those are two things. That's the other thing that I constantly say. It's one thing if that you're against Israel. Like, it would make sense that if you're against Israel or you're against the Jews for religious reasons or whatever else, you would automatically also be horrified by what Islam is doing. But for some reason, that doesn't exist. It's like, I'm against the Jews, but I'm also completely for Islam, which clearly Tucker Carlson and some of these other people are doing. And folks, what you need to see is this is a psychological operation that's taking place. It's the Red-Green Alliance. It's the Jihadi Alliance that is aligning with Russia, China, Iran, and many other countries. Qatar, like, they're pushing this stuff for the slow transfer of power from the U.S. Ultimately, it's going to end up being China. I mean, that's where the trajectory is taking this. Once they can deplete and diminish the United States to where it's no longer the superpower of the world that's holding back the evil that all of those things represent. China is going to turn on Russia. They're going to turn on the jihadis, and they're going to be pushing for communist and national takeover of the rest of the world. That's just a fact. But right now, one thing they have in common is their hatred for the United States. That is their common enemy. And they're conducting operations against us. And they're trying to convince people of things that aren't going to be in their interest. One of the things I love is we always hear, one of my favorite tropes is that, like, the Jews killed Jesus. So the Jews killed, obviously they were fulfilling prophecy. This is what was supposed to happen. Forget about all that. So that is one of the things that's used against Jews all the time. At the exact same time, we have these people saying, hey, we don't like Israel because they're Jewish. They killed Jesus. And then out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying, those are the different Jews. Those aren't even the same people that are.
We're the true Jews. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, are we good with them because they didn't kill Jesus? So those aren't the people that killed Jesus, but we still hate them. I don't know where to go with that, but that's always fun to explore.
The worst thing about the Green-Red Alliance is they've ruined Christmas colors forever.
Right.
I mean, it just, the decorating, what do you do?
It's like the gays with the rainbow.
It's so true. I wanted to create a bumper sticker on my car that says, reclaiming the Noahic covenant one bumper at a time with a big rainbow on it, but I don't think anyone would actually read it. They would just think I was gay. So anyway,
we've surrendered it. Like, all right,
it's over.
You guys got the rainbow. There's no getting that back. Let me jump through real quick. We only got a couple minutes left, but I want to jump through a couple of questions or comments. We always appreciate the super chats, folks. Question. Not that one. Question. Doesn't the Iranian people want the prince to take over? I heard the people will listen to the prince. I'll let you answer that, and then I have some comments on that as well.
I think that they would certainly entertain him coming in if that would actually do something. Okay. But the reality is that he's a figurehead that gives them some type of hope that he's maybe working for them on the outside. When it comes down to brass tacks, I don't think they would want someone that had been gone for that long to actually lead them in the country.
Yeah. And look, I think what he's basically agreed to do is, and a lot of people love Prince Pahlavi, and they want him to come in initially as an interim leader. And that's what he's also said. I want to come in, let's get the government established if they're able to overthrow the IRGC. And then from there, they'll figure out what type of government, who their leaders will be. That's kind of what's going on. But I think a lot of the Iranian people are taking their cues from Prince Pahlavi.
Ultimately, just like we fought a revolution to free ourselves from Britain, the Iranians are going to have to do the same thing. And they don't really have the tools to do that. But when it comes down to it, any person that's going to be free is going to have to fight for that freedom themselves.
Agreed. President said something about Syria helping with Lebanon. I think that's just crazy. The so-called president of Syria had a bounty on his head.
Yeah, we didn't get into that. But the reality of Trump calling this guy a good guy, really great guy, really likes him, talking about Jolani, he is literally a terrorist that the United States helped to install over Syria and has slaughtered upwards of 5,000 or 6,000 Druze, which are a minority population within Syria, which only stopped because Israel came in and stopped them. So, and he's already said he is the guy that's going to partner with Hezbollah. He's not going to be the guy that's going to fight them.
Yeah, and he's going to be a bigger problem for the United States later on down the road. And that is one of my biggest criticisms of Trump right now. I see him aligning with people for political, evil people, for political expediency and just trying to get this something done. And that's what we have going on there. And, just because it's expedient and it makes sense in the near term doesn't mean it just shouldn't be done. Like, we got to figure out who's evil, who's our friend, who's our foe, and go from there. But, aligning with these people for just political expediency doesn't make sense whatsoever. And we can't be so nearsighted. I know Trump is under a lot of pressure with the midterms coming up, but there's too much at stake. There really is too much at stake.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Dave, I really appreciate you coming on. I always love your insight. You're welcome on anytime. And I love hearing from you. We'll definitely have you back on in the near future. If you will, just take a minute and leave the viewers with some final words.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Pray for Israel. And again, just examine your belief systems, guys. That's what I mean. We're on here doing this because these are things that have helped us out, and we want to share truth. And ultimately, whenever you guys are thinking better and believing things that are true, the whole world's going to be better. And it's just going to have a trickle effect. You're going to be able to teach your kids better. You're going to be able to communicate with your colleagues and family members better. And that's all that really matters, And also, if you, particularly, I think, but this ultimately matters the most. What is true is, who is God and what has He said to us? What has He revealed to us on this planet that we are responsible for? And that is the most important thing that you can try to figure out in life. But I had a blast. Thanks for having me on, man. I look forward to doing it again.
Sounds good. Folks, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate you. I think we have a show tonight as well. I'll get back to you on that. We'll double check that. But we appreciate your support. Make sure you like and you share this content. That's the best thing that you can do, whether it's my content, Dave's content. Make sure you follow us, but also share the content. Get the word out there. We really appreciate that, and that makes a big difference. But for everybody out there, have a wonderful day. And until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.